Lately, we have heard so much about balancing our nervous system, the limbic system, mind body work. And if you are not healing enough, or if your situation in life is not where you want it to be, I highly recommend watching this full interview because we talk through core wounds, why the mind body matters, nervous system information, how it affects chronic illness, how it impacts your mood and the way that you respond to the world, and how it may be really painting the picture you're living now. And we also get into a powerful mind body activity. Hey guys, my name is Judy Cho and I'm board certified in holistic nutrition. And I have a private practice where we focus on root cause healing. And it often starts with the Carnivore Cures all meat elimination diet. Today, I'm excited to be sitting down with one of our team members, Shauna Mota. She is our lead instructor for the Mind Body program. She's a yoga instructor and she's a nutritional practitioner. Shauna comes with so much wisdom about the mind body and really melding all the information together to understand how our past traumas, our core wounds, the way that we were raised, things that have happened in our past, and how it really makes us who we are today and how it affects the way that we're living today. If you are suffering from gut imbalances, Shauna explains how a lot of our gut issues are actually related to that gut brain axis or that mindfulness and a dysregulation in our nervous system. We talk through ways that we can start healing and what all of these things look like. If you've had a small trauma in your past, or maybe dad wasn't ever around or mom wasn't around, if there have been small wounds in your past that you think are not really part of who you are today, I highly recommend watching this full interview. Hi, Shauna. I'm so excited to finally have you on fully on our channel and introduce you officially or more officially as our main mind body practitioner and lead instructor. So for the people that may not have seen our other interview, and I'll put that in the show notes, but if you can introduce yourself.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Shauna Mota, and I have the honor of working on Judy's team. My background is in holistic nutrition, yoga, meditation, mindfulness practices, and nervous system regulation. And I know that Judy and I have been on different but similar journeys that got us to a place where we, of course, are passionate about food. Judy has a whole clinic that focuses on food-centric and healing with food. But we also realized that there was this missing component, which is the mind. And so together, our journeys brought us together. And now we're here diving much deeper into this work with, a lot of Judy's clients and people that are really in need of healing.
I'm really excited to dive into this a lot more. And we've had several videos. We've even had one of our entire mind body team where we talk about the importance of mind body. But there's always this gap of, what's the connection between, okay, I get it. I need to work on my mind. I need to de-stress. We hear a lot of these things nowadays, but what is that connection to chronic illness?
Yes. Well, there is a massive connection because the power of our minds, which a lot of people don't think about, can set off a cascade of physiological responses. And so I can use my own journey. I know we did share this in the last one, but briefly, my own journey is to where I realized how the power of the mind can show up as symptoms or illness. And so I was managing, this is about 15 years ago, I was managing a naturopathic doctor's clinic. I was the clinic manager, patient care coordinator, and I would meet with the patients after they met with the doctor, go over their health plans and all of their treatments, which I learned so much there, by the way. But here I was, working the face of a health clinic, and kind of halfway through my journey there, I started to develop adult onset acne. And I had never had acne in my life, even as a teenager. I know that's very lucky, but it was blackheads, whiteheads, cystic acne all over my face. And I was poofy, I was inflamed. And here I was again, this supposedly supposed to be a beacon of health for this clinic, and I'm having acne all over my face. And I hired a naturopathic doctor at the time, Dr. Lauren Noel, and she was like, you should try the paleo diet. And I had heard of it, but of course I hadn't tried it before. So I go on the paleo diet, which is essentially cutting out all packaged processed foods, grains, dairy, anything that can really cause inflammation in the body. And my acne cleared about 80%. So that's when I first saw the power of food as medicine in my body. I also ended up losing about 12 pounds, which was just a bonus result of eating an anti-inflammatory diet. So that's what led me to get into nutrition. I went to get my holistic nutrition certification, holistic health coach certification. for the next 2 years, but the acne, the breakouts were actually still coming. So like I said, it got me 80% there, but they were still coming. And the truth is, the clinic that I was working at was a very high pace, stressful, and I would even say toxic environment to work in. And I was absolutely burnt out. And of course, you don't realize it at the time because it almost becomes your normal. And so as soon as I left that job, I was kind of at a crossroads, like, what am I going to do? And my best friend at the time had a yoga teacher training. So I went to do my yoga teacher training. I learned about mindfulness, meditation. And in all honesty, I had barely done yoga before I just went to do my teacher training. It was really a journey for myself to find peace within my body and my mind. And as soon as I did the training, about halfway through, my acne cleared up 100%.
Wow.
And have not had it again except for one time in my life where I was unable to manage my stress response. And so through that experience, and in this period of time for 3 years, I'm running people through these detox diets, taking out all the inflammatory foods, and everyone's seeing great progress. But then I realized, even if you're eating all the right foods, if your mind is stuck in a toxic cycle and you're having negative thoughts, limiting beliefs, or in this state of chronic stress, which a lot of us are in, that it is equally as detrimental, if not more detrimental, than the food that you're eating.
And in that example, like what was it about going to yoga and doing that that then can either support healing or cause more hurting?
So specifically, which we talk a lot about in mind body work, it's that it is the mind body connection, which is psychosomatic. I know that sounds, the word psycho, people think, but it's actually that is the full term. The mind is the psyche, and somatic is the body. And what happens so yoga, meditation, mindfulness, all of these things are grounding exercises that bring you to the present moment, and they activate your vagus nerve, which I know you're a huge fan of, and which activates the parasympathetic nervous system. So when we're in a state of constant stress, our sympathetic nervous system, a lot of people know about it as fight or flight, gets activated. So with more of these grounding techniques and the yoga and the calming, it almost becomes a way of life, and it's a way to interrupt the pattern of being in that stressful state. Like most people who do a yoga class, if you go to a sound healing or you go to have a massage, you come out feeling a very specific way, and it's usually a state of peace. And then we get bombarded again with all the things, and we can go back into that sympathetic cycle. So it's really about interrupting the pattern, supporting the vagus nerve, increasing your vagal tone, parasympathetic rest and digest, and calming and creating that balance between the hyperactive sympathetic stress response and finding peace.
When you're in that stressed response, it shuts down digestion. It impairs your immune system. So it's your body thinks that you have to run. So it will put all the energy into the blood into your extremities so you can run. It's no longer focused on making sure that whatever's in your body, the immune system is supporting the invaders in the body, but it's just everything is go, go, go. And I think when we live in this modern world where everything is always trying to achieve and be busy and or put out the next, best thing with our work or with our kids or performing, and all of that then just puts us in this stress state, and we just have normalized it. But our body thinks that we're constantly having to run. And eventually, as our immune system is a little bit hampered down, and then our gut function or our digestion is also reduced, which is all sort of in the same place, we will start having more chronic illness. And so I think that's where that mind body, and because it sounds so woo woo when people are like, okay, I have digestive issues, but you want me to work on my mindset, or what stressors do I have? And I think it's, if people understand that the vagus nerve is how everything connects and talks in your body, your brain connects to everything in your body. That's how then your stress response literally releases cortisol, and cortisol breaks down stuff in your body. And so how does that then relate to pain?
So again, when we are in this hypervigilant state, which essentially is our nervous system has been wired in such a way that it's always looking for the next stressor, the next danger in our lives. And that can be something as simple as somebody cutting us off in traffic. It could be getting a text from, a family member. It can be the simplest little things. So we're in this hypervigilant state. And again, when our sympathetic nervous system keeps getting activated, and it's like you said, with the vagus nerve, especially when it's connected to our heart, our brain, our digestion. So it's sending a cascade of physiological responses that was initially designed to get us out of clear and present danger. So it's a protective mechanism, but we get stuck in these cycles. And then with that, it's creating constant chronic inflammation. Our heart rate is elevated. And so with pain, for example, if we're like, one of the things when our sympathetic nervous system is turned on, we get really tense in our bodies. There's like a muscle tension or tightness. And over time, that can cause pain, inflammation in our guts. So that's, to me, that is like digestive issues for me is one of the biggest signs that there's an imbalance or a dysregulated nervous system or an imbalance between the mind and the body. Because I'm sure you've experienced this, Judy, and probably everybody listening, when you get anxious about something or you're about to have a difficult conversation or you're speaking on a stage in front of people or whatever it is. Some people get it with when traveling, like they get really anxious for flying. Where do you feel it? You know,
In your gut.
in our gut. Like we get, I mean, this is maybe TMI, but before lacrosse games in college, I would have to go run to the bathroom before every game because I was getting nervous about the game. So those simple things are examples of how just the mind or being in an anxious or chronically stressed state can, again, disrupt the gut. It can create even like that tightness or tension in your chest or chest pain. Like people can have anxiety attacks that present the same symptoms of heart attack or stroke just because they're in such a stress response. And so that's how it manifests in the physical body. And I think it's important to remember, if we are experiencing physical symptoms, something is off.
Right.
And a lot of times we ignore them or we normalize them. So like a bloated gut, like the shallow breathing, we almost, like you said, we get used to it so that we think that's normal. And it's not, because normal is being in a parasympathetic rest and digest state. And when we say rest and digest, our body is supporting us so that we can absorb the nutrients from our food so that we can sleep, and it balances our circadian cycles. And so when all of this is off, and I know you bring this up, is if you're sitting down for a meal and you're in a stress response and your body's going haywire, you may seem calm like right now, but your body's in haywire and it can't actually perform its normal processes to even digest the nutrients from your food, which I think is pretty wild.
Yeah, it's interesting. So when I learned that whole concept, especially in nutritional therapy school, when a lot of parents fight with their children to eat, and so the kid will cry and they're like, just eat like 4 more bites or whatever. I don't let my children eat when they're crying like that because I know that they're not probably digesting and assimilating. And so now my kids are a little bit older, but when they cry, I'll say, I think you should wait before you eat, calm down, do the breathing exercises, and then let's eat when you're a lot more in a, like you said, a rest and digest state so that you are absorbing your nutrients. And so I think all of those things are really important. The hiccup I see with our patients, especially, is people will say, well, I'm just wired that way. Like ever since I was young, I'm just a tense child, or I can't bring attention to more than one thing. And so there's all these nuances where people are like, no, that's just how I'm wired. It's not that I'm not balanced with my nervous system. How do you challenge that?
Absolutely. So the thing is, there is truth in I am wired that way, because we are all wired because of our childhood, how we were raised, who we were exposed to. So we do get wired in a certain way. Our brains and our nervous systems, through neuroplasticity, create these pathways and these patterns, and that creates our identity, our behaviors, who we are, and then our stress response. And I think, again, just like, oh, I'm bloating, that's normal. I always get bloated after meals. We normalize it. Like, I am this way. And I'm going to challenge that because, well, I've seen through the work that we do, I've seen so much change in people, and I've been through this road myself. Yes, we are wired away, but we do still have control to make change. And we can do it at any time. We can do it at any age. And it takes dedication and commitment. And a lot of people, unfortunately, don't get there until they hit rock bottom, where it's either chronic illness, symptoms, depression, anxiety. Like they get there so at the bottom of the barrel that they're like, something has to change because I can't keep running this old programming. And so I like to empower people through the science of neuroplasticity, because we know through neuroplasticity that the brain can adapt. It can, I always talk about it as like a road, like thinking of it as a network of roads where we can strengthen roads that are already there. So behaviors that are already there. We can even fix roads. Like if, let's say there's potholes in the road, we can learn new skills to fix those things. So when we say like, oh, I'm just that way, you can learn new things to fill in those potholes and have a smooth ride. We also, with neuroplasticity, can create new pathways altogether. So a lot of times we think about people who have stroke who have a stroke and they lose mobility of certain sides of their body, or they have to relearn to walk again, or you have to adapt. Like, let's say someone, sorry, this is a little intense, but it's what's coming through. Like someone's arm, they lose their arm. They learn to adapt, and the brain can learn to adapt. You can learn new languages, you can learn new things, but we stop because of that limited belief. Like you said, like, I've always been this way. That's the way that I am. But if you reframe that and know that we are capable of changing our brains, our thoughts, our behaviors, and even having control of our emotional bodies, that we can create change.
Yeah, I think in our limbic system, our brain tries to protect us, and we find these neural pathways that it's like, oh, Judy was stressed. She turned to food and binged, and that helped her cope and that made her feel good. So I'm going to remember that path. And then Judy will keep using it until it probably doesn't work enough, or, dopamine crashes and all of the things that become really bad with addictions. And at a certain point in my life, I thought, no, this is just how I'm wired. I'm going to always have an eating disorder and I just need to challenge it, but it's always going to be there. And my food is always going to be the thing I turn to, until I went through the carnivore diet and did all this mind body work. And now that is never my first thing. Even though I struggled with an eating disorder for, I don't know, a decade and a half, I never think I'm going to turn to food first. I mean, there might be moments where maybe I indulge a little bit extra, but it is normally what is bothering me, right? So you go through the mind body tools, and then I just process the emotions that I used to just escape with food. And so even in my own journey, I know for sure that we can rewire our brain, that whenever someone goes through a hard thing, what do you first turn to? And whatever that first thing that you turn to may not always be the most beneficial thing to turn to, but you can change it. And if it's not beneficial, you can change it. But now, I don't know, 7 years in, I don't turn to food anymore. And while it's a difficult journey, it is such a blessing afterward. And I think that's the whole, benefit of that neuroplasticity, where we can change our brain to do differently and protect us differently.
Absolutely. And it's so important, especially when you're asking about with trauma. My daughter's 5 years old. She got stung by a bee for the first time. Traumatic event happens. And then for 2 months afterwards, she didn't even want to go outside because, again, nervous system says bees are unsafe. Bees live outside. I don't want to go outside. So she didn't want to go outside. We would start to go outside and she would see a bee, and you could physically see her sympathetic nervous system go on. She would cry, she would run away, she would start breathing heavy. Like, I could see it in real time immediately, which is like a post-traumatic stress response. And here's the thing with trauma is we have evidence. So my daughter had evidence that bee stings hurt. It's not like we made that up, right? So whether we're talking chronic illness, trauma, past experience, stressors, we've experienced evidence in the past that tells us we are unsafe, whether it's pain, whether it's emotional pain, physical pain, whatever it is, our body tells us we're unsafe. So with the bee example, now we go out and she's having this PTSD response and freaking out. So what happens in our brains too is, I know we talk a lot about cognitive distortions, is we catastrophize, we overgeneralize. So like, all bees are going to sting me, or like a woman gets cheated on by a man, all men are cheaters, overgeneralizing. Or we just catastrophize, like worst case scenario, you see a bee, it's going to sting me, it's going to sting me, it's going to sting me. And then you're telling your body you're going to get stung. So it wants to protect itself and run away. And so this is exactly what happens with the trauma loop. Is there's a trigger. So let's call it the bee. We can imagine the bee is the trigger, and we see the bee and we go through the trauma response. And then guess what? There's a bee tomorrow too, because bees live outside. So like, there's always going to be a trigger, and it sets us off into that stress response. And so you get stuck in that loop. And that's where unresolved trauma. And the thing with trauma too, is it doesn't even have to be conscious. Like, you might not even remember the event or the trauma, but your body does and your nervous system does.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I had someone on not too long ago that talked about how our brain may think, so let's say we got food poisoning in a restaurant, and then we're like, I got sick off that chicken and I'm hypersensitive to chicken. We're not even aware that the next time I eat chicken, that maybe our sympathetic nervous system has turned on. And so then we eat chicken and then we don't feel well again, but it's not as bad as food poisoning. And now we label in our brain that chicken is not ideal for me. And so in our practice, that's the biggest thing we see all the time is, oh no, these foods for sure, or these supplements for sure make me sick and make me react. And so whenever I hear that now with our patients, and of course, some of it is true, people may have a mast cell response, even though mast cells are also in our brain, which also can be turned on by this whole mind body work. But when someone says, oh no, I can't eat chicken or I can't eat this, I know already that it's a losing battle. And so some of it has to be that mind body work of, or maybe as you heal your gut, you'll be less sensitive to it. And then as you're less sensitive, maybe you can eat more chicken. And so we challenge a lot of our patients with that. But so it's the same thing. It doesn't have to be a scary bee or a big trigger. It could just be something that happened. And then we labeled it or bucketed it in our brain that this thing is bad or this thing is good. And sometimes we mislabel because there's so much going on in the world and we misfire and label things. And so sometimes we need to tell our limbic system and use neuroplasticity to say, actually, this thing we labeled bad at one point is actually not that bad. And that's how I think we can get out of these, loops of chronic illness and inflammation. How much does this chronic illness inflammation also speak to our nervous system and also affect it or impact it in a negative way?
So that's where the power of thought comes in. And like what you were just saying, and the importance of cognitive reframing. When we're catastrophizing something or overgeneralizing, or we're in that stress response because of what happened then. So it's like, because of what happened then, chicken in the restaurant, we're now in a stress response now, even though there's just chicken on a plate, right? And even just being around it. So some people, even with just being around it, could cause a reaction. This is where cognitive reframing comes in, which is a really powerful tool. Typically, again, it's that, am I safe or am I unsafe? So something happens, and that's essentially what's happening in our brain. Am I safe or am I unsafe? If we determine we're not safe, it will set off that cascade of physiological responses. So if chicken is unsafe, that whole sympathetic activation is going to happen. We're not going to digest the food. We're not going to feel great eating the chicken. So a lot of it is, what we're doing is we're saying so let's say this is a disaster. I am unsafe. This is a disaster. Instead of cognitive reframing would be like, this is uncomfortable, but it's temporary. So it's just changing the words and the story that we're telling ourselves. And it's actually rebalancing the limbic system by speaking to the limbic system and telling it a different reality. And the power of thought, I always like to use the example if I guide you through a happy place meditation, which I love doing for people because I love seeing where people go. If I guide you to a happy place, just with my words, you close your eyes, you follow my voice, you go to a happy place, you're with people that you love, and you're happy and free. What type of emotions or feelings do you think you have? Positive, right? So most people, I guide them through this and they feel peace, joy, love, it's all happy. If I did the same exact thing, but I took someone to their worst trauma or a painful memory, they're not going to come out of it smiling, right? That is going to send different signals to the body, and they experience the event as if it were in front of them. So that shows us just the power of thought. So if we're focusing on happy place, the people we love, we come out of it feeling amazing, at peace. Parasympathetic is turned on. If we're focusing on the negative, the trauma, we will relive that inside of our minds and our bodies. Sympathetic is activated.
In our patient population, there will be people that maybe will get on some supplements for either gut healing, or they maybe need a little bit more nutritional support as they're healing their gut because they're not assimilating nutrients or they're not eating sufficiently. And there's a subset that will say, oh my gosh, this is so expensive. And so they're already thinking negatively, or even if it's not financials, it could be, I've taken supplements before. This is not going to work. This is never going to work. Or we have this other subset that will walk through them and say, put this in a happy box, a box of joy, and then draw on your bottles. And yes, like write how many times you need to take this a day, but also like this is the bottle that's going to heal my stomach. This is the bottle that's going to heal my gallbladder. This is the bottle that's going to support my small intestine and, heal the gut and no longer have SIBO. And you can see just from what you said of, when you do the guided meditations and we're speaking only positive things, we'll leave that meditation with this sort of calm state. Whereas if we're focused on super scary, super bad, super triggering, then we feel a lot more tense. And so I think even with supplements or our diet, whatever we are bringing to that. So if we're like, I don't know if carnivore will help me because all other diets haven't, so I'm probably the one that it's not going to work for. It's probably not going to work. Whereas if you say, I don't know about this carnivore diet. I don't know if we really don't need fiber or if saturated fats really aren't going to kill me. But if you go in saying, I am so desperate for healing, I know this diet can change my life, you can see the different perspectives of how much possibly someone can heal. And I think that's where that mind body is so important. But going to what is safe and unsafe, the more we work with people, and this is why we really created this whole mind body program, but we asked a question of, do you have trauma from your past? And most people will say yes. And some of them will share really difficult traumas where it's heartbreaking to see. And then our follow-up question is, have you done something about it? And a lot of people have not. They, either they read a book or maybe they've just let time heal, but I don't know if time really heals it. If we can talk a little bit about how core wounds and what that even means, and how our childhood, maybe even the ACE score, how that really affects and molds us. And we were talking about attachment theory behind, but we'll talk about that maybe another time. But it's just interesting that so much of who we are today, even as grown adults, is because of where we come from.
Absolutely. And it's kind of a wild concept, but it's very true that typically, again, our identity, our behaviors, our beliefs about ourselves in the world, our definition of love and healthy relationships, all of those things happen really between the age of 3 and 7, like when we're really young. And when we talk about trauma and core wounds, there's big T trauma, which are like the more intense traumas, but there's also little T trauma. It's almost like comparing apples to oranges. Trauma is trauma. Even if they are small little things, a lot of people don't consider them trauma. So my mom, for example, we were just talking at Thanksgiving, and she was saying that her parents essentially neglected her. They didn't speak to her. She basically didn't exist. She was on her own from the age of 5, walked to school by herself, came home, ate her dinner. They didn't ever ask about school. They really didn't talk to her. They didn't ask about school. They didn't show up to her events. They had no idea what she was doing. When she was 7 years old, she rode to Niagara Falls by herself on a bike from Buffalo, came back. They never even knew she went. And we were talking about it, and I'm like, wow, like that's a big trauma. And she's like, that's not trauma. What do you mean? And I was like, neglect is trauma. So I'm just bringing that example up to know that it can be something small or big, or a lot of us don't realize traumas that we had. And what happens is when something happens that makes us not feel good. So I'm going to keep saying safe or unsafe. Unsafe could be pain. It could be heartbreak. It could not feel good. It could be physical. It could be emotional. It could be mental. But when we determine an event happens, we determine we're unsafe, that then develops a narrative, which are the core wounds. And there's a lot of work around core wounds. We talk about 5 main ones. So the 5 that we focus on are worthiness, trust, belonging, prioritization, and safety. And when any of these are compromised, it could be one event where someone, a teacher, a parent, a sibling, or a peer says something to you that affects your worthiness, or someone betrays you and that affects your trust. You get not invited to a party, or you get pushed out of something, and so you feel like you don't belong, or you get made fun of. Maybe your parents, like my mom's example, didn't prioritize you. And then there's the safety, which could be physical, mental, emotional. Something happens in your childhood, and your safety is compromised. So it can be something, again, so small as your mom not showing up to your soccer game. And then you have a worthiness issue, you have maybe a trust issue, and then you feel under prioritized. And so when these things happen in childhood, we develop one of these major core wounds. And most wounds that come, or things that come now, are from these main 5. So we develop this core wound, and then we create a story that I am not worthy, I am not lovable, I cannot trust people, I'm an outcast, I don't belong, or I am unsafe. And again, with those core wounds, we make up these narratives and these stories as fact. And then again, we continue on our life, and things happen. And a simple trigger of you don't get invited to something as an adult, and you feel like you don't belong. And so these triggers happen in our lives, and it reactivates that core wound. And again, the stress response. And it's pretty crazy, because over time we've made up these narratives, and then we search for evidence. So our lovely reticular activating system in our brains searches for evidence to validate our beliefs. So if we believe we're unworthy, our brain will continue to look for examples of our unworthiness, and we will see it everywhere, and we will find them, and we will continue to live in that wound. And the same is for any of the other wounds, or even the sick. I am sick. We identify, a lot of people, I am sick, I am sick, I am sick. We sneeze once, oh my gosh, I'm getting sick. And we live in that energy. And so that's how it plays out. And it's all related to what happened 10, 20, 30 years ago. So this is where we talk about how the past ultimately, most of us are living in the past, and we're letting these past wirings and networks control our current responses and our future.
Yeah, there's so much truth to that. When you talked about big T trauma, my father, stuff happened in his past. And so his was pretty big T trauma because my grandmother lost everything, family stuff happened, and she decided to give half of her children to the orphanage. And my dad was the oldest of that. And so he then had this, I think, big T trauma of belonging. And so he lost his mom when he was a lot older than his younger siblings. And he was never adopted out. And I think he always felt a lack of worthiness. And so then with us, even though we've never really had big T trauma, unless we were good enough or perfect enough, my dad would always be hard on us. And I think then we replicated his trauma, but not with a big traumatic event. And so we had those similar core wounds of we need to perform or otherwise we won't be loved, or we need to be as perfect as possible. Otherwise, I am not worthy or I will not belong. If I was stripped of everything, would people still love me? And I used to believe no. Like, if I don't have something to offer, why would anyone want to love me? And I see it in my dad because until the day, I'm not going to get emotional, but until the day my grandmother passed away, I saw him try so hard to earn her love, even though all that happened. And so it's just, I see how much our core wounds, then that is our sort of our marching order for the rest of our lives of I need to prove. And then you see it in the people you become friends with or the people you end up marrying. For example, if your father isn't the most ideal person to emulate, you may end up finding a man that's similar because it's familiar to you. If you grew up in a sort of toxic or unsafe or a place where core wounds was really prevalent, and you meet a man that you're like, oh my God, he gets me, but it's more that you both have similar core wounds or grew up in that kind of volatile environment, the outcome is not so ideal. The more we become hyper aware of these things, we can change these generational traumas and we can change our core wounds. And so maybe if you could talk a little bit about the ACE score and maybe how a higher ACE score causes a higher risk of illness.
Yeah. So with the ACE score or the test, it's a test that you can take. I think there's like 12 to 15 questions that is determining the level of trauma that you experienced as a child. And it's I think, again, it is a great scale to look at and tool to look at to know kind of where we land on that. If we have a high ACE score, and again, if people aren't aware of this and they're not even looking into this, they don't even realize how much that is impacting their illness, their lives, their mental health, their emotional health, their behaviors, and their habits, and their relationships. So honestly, your ACE score will impact everything around you. And so I think it's an amazing tool to use. And then also just the whole process of doing this mind body work. And when we're talking about trauma and healing, is the first number one step is awareness. We have to be aware to be able to make change. So it's learning all these things about ourselves, our ACE scores, our core wounds, our love languages, our family roles, like the roles that we played as children in our families. And the more that you study, it's basically a process of self-study. And the triggers in our current day are the guides, because that is showing us that there is an unhealed wound within us. So when we get reactive, when we get into our stress response because something triggered us, that's where the work starts. That's where it begins. And for a lot of people, that's an uncomfortable place to look. So trigger happens and we have to stop, pause. And that's where all of the mindfulness techniques come in, the grounding techniques, the breath work, all of the actual techniques are so that you can pause and take control of your stress response. So we get triggered, we start to get activated, our breath, we can feel it in our chest. Some people see red. Everyone's response is different. Some people go to anger, some people shut down, freeze, flight, fight. We know all these, fawn. And the whole mind body work is to stop. So we say pause, use your technique to calm the self. And then it's a process of Socratic questioning and self-inquiry. What caused me to go into a triggered state? Because often the thing that's triggering us, there's a There's always a deeper core wound attached to that. And the more and more we study our response and our stress response and reactions, the more we'll realize that there's kind of a similar pattern going on. And it's going to show up in our work, in our relationships. It shows up everywhere. And so we triggered, we calm ourselves, and then we do the work to reframe. So again, when we're having that triggered response, we're feeling unsafe in some way or another. So it's using the tools like grounding techniques to know we are safe. You can calm down now. And that's where we do a lot of dialogue and scripts, actually speaking to our nervous system to reprogram the stress response, creating that safety. And then we create a new pathway, which is essentially the goal is a new behavior, because the behavior that we've been running and the programming that we've been running our whole lives isn't working. It's causing us stress, anxiety, depression, chronic illness, autoimmune disease. So we calm and we choose another path. And it's not necessarily easy work, but the more that we get to know ourselves, the more we will find healing.
No, I fully agree. I think everyone feels those triggers, but most people then use something to get that dopamine kick, an escape, which then oftentimes becomes an addiction. And then they just can't get out of it. But it's because we're not pausing to see that, okay, we actually have to deal with the trigger and we have to understand, why is it triggering us? Why is it affecting us? And in that, while it's such hard, ugly, messy, tearful work, but it is so freeing. When I was going through the eating disorder facility, one thing I loved about that place was they taught you a lot of, these cognitive behavioral therapy and dialectical behavioral therapy tools. And it was so interesting. My therapist was like, you realize you're a perfectionist. And up till that point, I've never heard that. And I was like, no, I don't think I am. I definitely work hard. And then she was like, can you give me your notes? And I was like, can I rewrite them and then I'll give you my notes? And she's like, right there. It baffled me. And then we went down this whole process of, why do you need to rewrite your notes? And I was like, because it's messy. And she's like, I don't care. I can have it messy. And as we went down the continuous question of, okay, so say that's true. And then what? And I realized, if my notes aren't good enough or clean enough or make sense enough, you may judge me or think I'm not worthy or good enough. And so therefore, I want to put in the effort. And it's not about the notes looking clean, but a reflection of who I am. And maybe you won't find me worthy or that I belong. And so that's where that perfectionism so often stems from core wounds of, unless I'm good enough, then I won't be worthy. And so it was so fascinating to see that. But instead, I would always turn to food. I would always turn to, I feel stressed. My boss needs this from me and I need it to be perfect. So instead of dealing with why I'm even doing that, I would just turn to food, have my escape, feel that dopamine kick, and then go through the whole shame spiral of like, why am I still doing this? Without ever understanding that there were these core wounds that were causing this whole vicious cycle, until I went through the process and, started having better boundaries. And it's made such a big difference in my life. And so that's why I share. And that's why, you know how important this information is. How do we start really healing? So yes, we need to pause and then really consider, what are we going through? But how do we, what are some steps that we can start breaking free of our, habits, or the way that our nervous system plays out?
Yeah. And so a lot of the work that we do is mindfulness, which are grounding techniques, again, to bring you to the present moment. Because first and foremost, we need to tell our nervous system that we're safe. Because until we are in rest and digest and in a safe environment within our bodies, we can't heal and we can't take that next step. So number one is applying a tool. So breath work is one of my favorite things, or I should even just call it breathing, deep breathing. So diaphragmatic breathing, which essentially you bring the breath beyond the chest into the belly, and you take slow, deep breaths when you're feeling that triggered response. That's one of the most powerful tools to balance the nervous system when it's activated into sympathetic. And there's a lot of different breathing techniques I know that we go over in our program and that are out there that you can find, but the breath is number one. And then the grounding. So again, grounding and mindfulness are going to bring you to the present moment so that you feel safe. And so a lot of that could be like orienting, like actually looking around to tell yourself, I'm safe, my feet are on the ground, I'm in a safe environment. And some people can become that for you as well. You may have people in your lives that are your safe space where you feel safe. And then, Or there's like the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, where you're kind of going through and checking with your 5 senses. So naming 5 things you can see, smell, hear, touch. And those things are really, really important. There's also, for the nervous system, the progressive muscle relaxation, which is a simple technique of contracting and releasing your muscles. So when we're holding on and we're clenching and we're in that tightness, so imagine holding on to anything from the past, or we're worried about something in the future, and that's taking all of our attention and our energy. So when you're clenching, you're holding, then there could be all these beautiful things floating around you, but you're holding on to this thing so tightly that you're not available to grasp anything else. And that's kind of what happens with our trauma and with all of that, is that we're holding on to the past. So there is no option for a new pathway or something in the future. So by exhaling, releasing, letting go, and focusing more on, again, being in a parasympathetic state, we can then create a new path toward healing in the future. So one important thing about the techniques is to realize that not one size fits all. So not one technique that will turn on someone's parasympathetic, like a massage. For someone who potentially had physical abuse or sexual trauma, that will actually do the opposite and activate their sympathetic. So knowing that you learn the tools and you select the ones that are best for you. So cold exposure for some people is an amazing therapy that, again, in the immediate, yes, you're turning on or activating, but then you're learning to use the power of breath and mindfulness and grounding to stay calm in even, a triggered cold environment. And so for some people, that is amazing. And then for some people with cold exposure who have adrenal imbalances or even could have a trauma with cold, I had a friend who actually had a traumatic experience when he was younger with cold water. That could then set that person into a sympathetic. So it's really learning the tools that make you feel safe and at peace.
Yeah. And I used to wonder why mindfulness would, like why, if me looking around the room and pointing out things or doing the senses improve my nervous system. And I realize it's because if people are hyper aware of what they're thinking about, they'll start realizing they're ruminating in thoughts and emotions and things in the past and being upset about something. And they're just thinking without being mindful of the present. And when you're hyper aware of, like when I'm doing the dishes, of how does the warm water feel on my hands? How does the soap feel? How does the dishes feel as I'm cleaning it with soap? Those sensations and being hyper aware, you can't think of anything else. And so that's why you're in the present. And that's why mindfulness is so important. I want to leave people with like one small exercise that we sometimes do. And so people can sort of feel literally what we're talking about and how our body tenses and then relaxes.
Yeah, that's a really great one. Okay, so I'm going to ask, if you're driving, don't close your eyes. But if you're in a safe environment, I do think closing the eyes is powerful. So just getting in a comfortable seated position and gently closing the eyes as a cue to go within. We'll take a deep breath in through the nose, sending the breath all the way down to the belly. And exhale with an audible sigh. One more deep breath in through the nose, sending it all the way down to the belly. Exhale with a sigh. Okay, returning the breath to a natural pace in and out through the nose. I guess you could open your eyes for this or keep them closed, but we're going to put the hands out. And as we inhale, we're going to clench the fists as hard as we can. So taking a deep inhale, inhaling all the way to the top and hold. So hold the breath, clench the fist as hard as you can for 1, 2, 3, 4. Release the fist and your breath with a sigh. One more time, deep breath in through the nose, closing the fist, clenching the fists, holding the breath at the top. So hold, 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 and slowly release. So coming back into the room. So just with that one simple exercise, you can feel that tightness, that tension, that constriction, which is what happens when we're in a stress response. So we have shortness of breath, our chest tightens, our heart goes faster, and we feel just that clenching and that feeling. That's what's happening in our bodies. But when you exhale and go, that's the parasympathetic nervous system, the calm being activated.
And thank you for doing that. And I love it. And I felt a sense of calm. If people, when they do that breath work and they start feeling a little dizzy, it's usually because they're in a consistent stress state. And so they're not used to having a lot of oxygen in their system. And so when they're breathing in a lot more, and if they get dizzy, they'll just have to get used to that. But then it's also an indicator that you're probably living a pretty stressed state. And so it's something that you need to work on. Let me ask you a couple things about our mind body program. What is it? You've been in the yoga space, the mindfulness, you've done a lot of your own training, but what is it about ours? And obviously there's going to be a little bit of bias there, but if, you can share wholeheartedly of, what was different about our practice that you even wanted to, join our mind body program and be the lead instructor?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is you and your heart and how much heart you put into everything that you create because you really care. And so number one, it was you and your mission to help people heal. And I know we talked about the Starfish Story, but just to share with people, there was a boy on the beach throwing starfish back into the ocean that had come up onto shore. And a man saw the boy and said, there's 100 starfish, there's miles of beach, so you're not going to make a difference. And the boy picks up a starfish, throws it back in the ocean, and says, I just made a difference for that one. And you shared that story with me when I first started working for you. And that for me, the fact, again, your heart and the compassion and care that you have for this mission. And I feel 100% aligned with that. But also, just your whole practice, your team, everything is a reflection of you, and your team is amazing. And I think what makes our program unique is that we do have clinical therapists on the team. It's not just me leading the calls, but we all come with a background and very different tools, techniques, and expertises. And I think that holistic approach, having Cheryl, who's more clinically based, me, who's more mindfulness, yoga based, and then the content itself and the curriculum itself is actually quite sciencey based because that's from Judy's head. You get this holistic approach to it, and the depth that you have gone to include all the information that you have is quite phenomenal. And for me, like the process that I've gone through in my own healing, it's taken 15 years. And I feel like somehow in this 12-week program, you have encompassed everything that is pertinent to healing. And so I'm just in awe of the curriculum itself. And then the gold in our program, well, there's a few things that make our program really, really valuable is the community and the connection, because a lot of people have gone through so much, whether it's trauma, chronic illness, pain, that they feel alone. They feel alone in their healing. And a lot of other programs, you can go read the information, you can learn about it, you can look it up, but it's very different going through a cohort and a group together with humans who have a wound in the same shape as yours. They've gone through it. And I think that the community and the calls that we have, the weekly calls that we have are the most valuable part of the program, but also the techniques and the technique videos. So we actually guide you through the techniques so that you walk away with a whole new toolbox filled with tools. It's not just information. It's practical, accessible, tangible techniques that you can apply to anything you're currently dealing with, any past traumas. It can be coupled with any therapy that you're doing. And it's the tools that people walk away with that are absolutely invaluable. And just reading a PDF about grounding and mindfulness or orienting or any of HeartMath, all of these techniques, reading a PDF, but actually walking through and practicing it so that you can refine it and it can become a default tool for when you are in a challenging time in your life. It's the most powerful thing I think about our program.
Yeah, I think once you sort of open Pandora's box and that that's why you're reacting to what you are, why you're triggered, even if you go through the mind body program and you never use a tool again, you can never close Pandora's box in that way. So now that is a core wound from my childhood, or that is why I'm reacting, or that is why I'm attracted to that person, or that is why something else. And I think eventually that awareness will bring you back to the tools, because one day it will be too hard. And then you'll remember the tools that will get you to healing. And I think that's why it's so powerful. Thank you for all the kind words. And this Starfish Story always gets me so emotional, but that is our mission, is to really help people. And I think, we brought the science, we brought the videos, we brought, Bianca did a lot of the creative videos and the graphics, and we told the story. But I think it was you coming on this program that then brought the heart and the actions and just completed it. And so I'm so forever grateful. It's just everything worked out in an incredible way. And so I know that the mind body work is sort of not fully accepted yet in the wellness space. I feel like it's kind of getting there, but I know that it is such a big part of healing. And I know it because we've worked with so many people that have core wounds. There is a correlation with people that are chronically ill, that have had wounds in their past, that they are like, that was just my past. And it's like, no, like we need to put a light on it. And when you shed light to darkness, there's no more dark, or at least there's less dark. And when you do it with a community or people that have gone through it, or have these bright leaders and support systems, it just makes it a little bit easier. And so, well, it's easier to share carnivore and like eat a piece of meat and you take this one supplement. And I know this work isn't always the easiest, but I think it is one of the biggest parts that will make your life free. And I don't know how else to convey it other than what we've been sharing, but it's been a powerful part of my healing too. Well, thank you so much, Shauna, for joining me today and just talking through this. It's such fascinating work. And the more you dive into it, the more you uncover new things and new tools and new techniques. And I appreciate so much what you've brought to the table in our team and, being part of our team now. So if you can maybe share where people can find you, how they can learn more about the Mind Body program.
So I would head to Nutrition with Judy's website. You can learn more about the Mind Body program and when our next cohort is releasing, because we do them in real time since we put so much love and effort into the program and guide everyone through it. And then I also do consulting with clients of Judy. So people who are looking for a little bit more hand holding and going deeper into their own personal experiences with the mind body work. That's also an opportunity to work with me and the team. So.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I'm excited for, people to learn more about the mind body, the nervous system. And if anything, people could do that breath work exercise you just showed. And yeah, I think that even the clenching of the fist.
So there is no option for a new pathway or something in the future. So by exhaling, releasing, letting go, and focusing more on, again, being in a parasympathetic state, we can then create a new path toward healing in the future.
I love it. That's a perfect way to end. Thank you so much for your time. I love you, Shauna. I'll talk to you soon, but thank you so much again for your time. Okay, guys, I hope that this conversation really spoke to you and made you think of things that can be reasons why you're not fully healing, or even living the life that you want to or are meant to live. A lot of this work goes really within and does a lot of self-introspection, but it is powerful work that will allow you to thrive. Shauna is such a bright beacon of hope that I am so grateful to be part of our practice. And she really brings all of the tools together in our Mind Body program. This Mind Body program has been so powerful that you can see it in some of our testimonials from our previous cohorts. I'm going to share a couple right now so that you can see that it's not really us just sharing, gosh, guys, you got to do this mind body work, but that it is life altering. I would never bring or create or put out there stuff that I don't truly feel can change your life. It is in this work that so much of your life can change and also bring healing. In the show notes, you can check out a lot more about the Mind Body program and when our next cohort starts. We already have some cohorts that have graduated and some of them have become lifelong friends. Okay, guys, make sure to eat a lot of meat, take care of your bodies and your minds, because it is the only place you have to live. I will talk to you later. Bye, guys.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to everybody too for the participation and the hard work that I know the team has put in, and for everybody who's been sharing and speaking the truth and doing the work. And Judy, you're a great motivational speaker and leader, so thank you.
But it really was put together really well, and it's helped me a lot. And I really appreciate everything that y'all put a lot of work into this program, and it's a really excellent program. So thank you.
This has been so helpful, and a lot of it I already knew. I am a certified health coach, but being in this group and with the way that you presented it, it really made it come to life and made it really sink in to where I can use these modalities and actually see a difference. Y'all were amazing and so easy to understand and just digest all of the material and be able to translate that into our daily lives. I really appreciate y'all. Love y'all so much. Thank you.
What am I willing to do in order to heal? And it's not an absence of resources, because as you guys have shown, like the 8 weeks of things that you've provided, that's more than enough information to help me. So yeah, thanks again for just setting up the program and all the efforts you guys have put in.
All of the tools and the techniques that this cohort has given me, and I just want to say thank you to Judy, to you, to Cheryl, Bianca, all your entire team, all the people in this group who have showed up and encouraged me and shared their stories. It's given me hope and a sense of connection, and reminded me that I'm not by myself. I don't have to do this alone. And if this is the last chance I get to see all y'all, just I love you and thank you, and God bless all of you. And I just want to say thanks. I wouldn't be where I'm at without all the stuff that this group has given me. So thank you so much. Thank y'all.
The community here, everybody, not just the coaches, but everybody has been, when you feel so isolated and alone, and everybody thinks you're a hypochondriac, and to see the people here that share their vulnerability and their raw pain was like just such a gift. Everybody that shares, there's a nugget. And that has been the biggest thing. And I've made some relationships here that I know will continue on. People that are on the journey, because nobody else I know wants to do the work. They're just like, let's flee. Let's not deal with any of this, So I'm very, very grateful. I have love for myself that I have never been able to drum up or to make happen. But I was doing the heart breathing. I had to write a forgiveness letter for somebody. I had to write one for myself. There's a lot of shame from my past. And then it was like it just shifted. It was major. And it's like Scott said, I'm a new person. I'm showing up every day in my relationship with myself in a whole healed way that I never thought possible. And I do, I have my things. When I get a little stressed, I do my box breathing, and I love the tapping because I'm releasing the negative lies, the deception, what was labels were given me, and I speak truth after I release it all. And then I do the brain, the BRH, and I'm just speaking positive, life-giving things over myself. And that's huge for me, because I've done all the trauma work, I've done all the work, but this was like something I couldn't drum up. And it's a healing, because it feels just so right, and it feels so good to just see myself in a different light, that I'm showing up as a different person. So I'm just really grateful for everybody on here. It's just been really rich for me. And I know confidently that I will continue to move forward and just keep this as part of what I do during the day. So I thank everybody, because it's made a huge difference. And feeling safe with these people that share, and everybody knowing that, Bianca and Cheryl and you, and everybody has something to offer that just gets you through the rough days. So grateful, very, very grateful.
Say thank you to this program for giving me the capacity just to do abdominal breathing through all this incredibly shocking sense of just a surprise that I couldn't get on my airplane, and I had to readjust. So no sayulita, no Puerto Escondido, no body surfing, but I'm surfing my life pretty well, I think, thanks to abdominal breathing.
Beautiful.
I ask myself every single day. I just try to say, imagine what's possible today. Like, imagine what might go right, or what might change, or something awesome could happen. Feeling a lot more positive and happy and grateful, and also just feeling in general like more peaceful.
It's just been so impactful. Just meeting each one of you, knowing your journeys, having the instruction of you ladies, like your heart's in it all the way. And that was so evident through the whole program, through what was written and these calls and every part of it. And I just feel like, for me personally, it set me up for an amazing 2025.
I loved it. I thought it was a really great experience. I thought you were wonderful, and everyone. I love the meditations, how we started the day. I particularly like the HeartMath, just because it works so well live for me. I saw my niece respond right there, and I've been doing it since. I feel like I have some new tools now, and that's really what I was looking for. Instead of being so reactive and anxious and worried, I just wanted tools to say, I don't need to be like that anymore. I know what I can do. And thank you, Judy, for having this class. It's really, really mind-blowing. Wonderful class.
Perfect. Everything. I just love the clearance. I didn't think I would. So I thought that was really neat because I just didn't know. But tying it all together and putting it in a context of, you guys know what we go through because you've been there. So that made a huge difference. And
I'm here going through the program, pulling these gems, like from the forgiveness piece and from core wounds. And it brought so much peace in the middle of a sleepless night. And I'm just very, very thankful. Like, it's so inclusive. It's not just somatic work. It's not just brain retraining. It's the physical constructs, and it's the faith-based part that is woven through it all. And it's just those deep dives like I talked about in the diet. I don't know. I've never done a program that was so inclusive. And I am so thankful, and I know it's going to bring lasting change. And I feel like not only in my family, or myself, but my kids.
And I think that is an important thing to bring up, is the impact that it has doing the work yourself, the impact that it has to all of those around you. And if you haven't seen it yet, you will as you continue down the path. And I just want to thank all of you for showing up every single week and just like opening your heart and your truth to all of us.
Listening to everybody was really great. I also really liked the HeartMath. That's probably one of my favorite things. And it's sort of made me put how I approach things in a different perspective.
I've loved the program. There were a lot of things that I knew and a lot of things that I didn't know, and it was really amazing learning. And my brain is half science and half spiritual, and so just being able to see, wonderful connection between all of those things was wonderful. And I feel like every one of the facilitators or teachers here, I've had special moments of things that I've learned from each of you, and so that has also been wonderful. I've felt a real connection with all of you.
The connection, like, how do I understand that when I'm ruminating on negative thoughts or focusing on the bad, that is impacting my health today? And I think forgiveness, core wounds, addictions, these are things that we all carry. And if we can understand how it shapes us, that it is building the narrative, how we function today in our relationships, in the way we communicate with people, in the way we protect our hearts, these things are what is causing us to be less close.
Thank you, Judy. And thank you, everyone, for sharing.